They're well. The sun is shining. The inauguration went off pretty much without a hitch yesterday, it seems, depending on what side of the fence you're on. Actually, I think everybody's happy. I think everybody is happy. I was in a space yesterday with some friends of mine who are diehard conservative, but not necessarily diehard conservative Trump people, and they were pulling their Trump stickers off their vehicles, and we're like, I am just glad we're going back to something normal legislation, normal, conversations about just fiscal disagreements and how we're going to make things happen versus legislating via tweet storms. So hopefully we will achieve some level of normal in that. All that aside, I am happy to see all of you here. As I mentioned earlier, I'm only going to be on for about the first hour. I've got a county meeting at 11. And, what I want to say is what I said the last couple of times I was here as president of the council. First of all, welcoming you all, which I did already. And secondly, talking about how much we appreciate the business partnerships we have here in the city and how we are working hard to make sure we can support you all to the extent that we can in all the ways that we can. And little story I have, I made my way to Will's decorating. I was not avoiding going there, but as Kate knows, I don't typically go into stores because I end up like buying stuff I just don't need. And we're doing, or my husband, in the case of Kate's shop, will take a sewing class or something like that. And I was in the store, and he was just saying how appreciative he was of the city and how welcomed he's felt in the community since he opened last fall. So, and that's by not only folks out on city staff, but also businesses around there. So to all of you, hats off to how we support our new and existing businesses within the community. That said, I know that there are, as a business owner myself, I know that there are consistent and growing challenges that exist surrounding our seemingly daily new normal that exists. And I hope that we can all get as much support as we need, and the city can provide as much structure and instruction on things as we can. So with that, Mr. Chandler, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm going to turn.
I'll just go through.
Office is messy.
I will. I will go through some of sort of the operating the meeting. We've got some questions coming in, which are terrific. So this meeting is being recorded, so be mindful of your background and what you say. In terms of operating the meeting, we rely on the chat, more of a function to prepare and submit links to references. So if you have questions, please don't use the chat. There's a Q&A function. And so that enables us to look at the questions and ensure that we're able to answer them. So if you have questions as a speaker is presenting, please feel free to use the Q&A, and we'll go through them. If we feel that the question has been answered, we may reference that. If the speaker is finished and the question has not been answered, we'll be able to provide that to the speaker, and so they're clear what the question is. So those are the general rules. So this is being recorded. This will be posted. I think Kate sent the link in the chat, but we'll repost that as we start to conclude the meeting. We anticipate this meeting being about an hour and a half. We try not to take up too much of everyone's time. And it's going to be a function of how much everyone wants to have a discussion as we're going through various topics. We, in terms of content, at our first meeting, we provided a survey, and we've got responses from the participants. And so we're trying to provide speakers and programming that is responsive to that survey question. I think at our next meeting, we'll do another survey to just keep a pulse on the type of content you've asked to receive. And so it will evolve sort of as needs evolve and as we receive feedback on the types of topics you all want to discuss. That being said, the speaker we have today, I think, is very relevant. So we've been speaking with Maryland Small Business Development Center, and they've provided us a list of speakers and topics. And based on, again, the feedback we received from you all, we have with us Matthew Johnson today. Matthew is he is the attorney and advisor with Johnson Business Group. The primary focus of the topic that he'll be speaking about is business interruption and recovery planning. No surprise, a lot of Maryland small businesses presentations and materials this year are focused on this particular topic or variations. And so after Matt is finished with his part, I'm going to drop some links into the chat for other topics that are scheduled through Maryland Small Business Development Center. They are free. If there are topics that really interest you or relevant to your business, I would encourage you to participate. They're pretty tight in terms of time, but I'll wait to include that information after Matt is done with his presentation. Again, if you have any questions for Matt as he's speaking, drop them in the Q&A, and we'll get back to them after he's done presenting. So with that, Matt, the floor is yours. Thank you again for spending a little time with us this morning.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm getting ready to share the presentation. My contact information will be at the end of the presentation. So if you want a copy of the presentation, I'm happy to provide it. Just shoot me an email and we'll get it out to you. That's my logo page. There we go. The session is about business interruption planning and recovery. It's really about, as we all sort of learned last year, there's absolutely no way to predict an interruption. Unless you happen to live, for example, in Oklahoma in Tornado Alley, you really don't know what's coming. So there's no real easy way of determining any of that. So yes, I'm a lawyer, but I also advise small businesses. So this is primarily what I do. Small businesses, we look at operations from a legal point of view. So I do handle the law side of things. Work with a lot of small businesses with dealing with their employees. I do copyright trademark law because I'm nerdy like that. It's also protecting the intellectual property and the brands of particular companies. If you know nonprofits, I also work with nonprofits. Most of how we do it is through general counsel and what we call Ask Matt the Lawyer subscription plans, flat fees, certain services that are available. All that stuff is on the website, so you can read through that. All right, so lawyers love disclaimers, so here we go. I am a lawyer, but I am not your lawyer unless you hire me. I'm going to be talking about some legal stuff, not a lot, but it's not, what we talk about here is not going to be privileged legal advice, so don't be running around saying, my lawyer is Matt the lawyer, and he said, no, he didn't, okay? I assume every question that you ask me is hypothetical. You should assume my answers are also hypothetical. The facts and circumstances of your particular situation may require different legal advice. And if you need confidential legal advice, you should consult an attorney. How you doing? My name's Matt. I'm a lawyer. All right. So when I start talking about disaster recovery and planning and things like this, I tell the story of Apollo 1. Apollo 1, for those of you who didn't know, is there was a fire in the spacecraft during a test. 3 astronauts lost their lives. So there was a catastrophic loss of life and the training investment in those men. Astronauts Grissom, White, and Chaffee, millions of dollars has been spent on selecting them, training them, and preparing them for what they were doing. Of course, there was a catastrophic loss of millions of dollars of equipment. In the follow-on investigation, astronaut Frank Borman was the astronaut representative on the panel, and he was testifying before Congress, and he was essentially asked what happened. And what he talked about was a failure of imagination. He said, we simply could not imagine that this would be something that we would have to deal with. So yes, there was something that happened that was unexpected. It was tragic. It was costly, but it's not a failure of procedure. It's a failure of imagination. So when we start talking about business interruption and we start talking about planning for interruption, we're not really planning for the interruption. We're planning on how to recover from it. And a lot of what's going to revolve around is planning your responses. So when you set up to start planning a response, you first want to imagine and define the worst. So how do you imagine the worst? Well, you could hire a lawyer. We're really good at imagining the worst case scenarios, but you should also be looking at other advisors, people like your accountants, insurance brokers, mentors, colleagues, people in your community, and just sort of imagine what could go wrong. Now, if you and I and this whole group had met 18 months ago, none of us would have thought about a pandemic. Not one of us would have thought about a pandemic. We might have thought about a fire, a flood. We might have thought about, wind damage or storms or something like that. We might have thought about electrical failures. Those are the kinds of things we would have thought about. But we probably would not have imagined government-ordered shutdowns of non-essential businesses and restrictions of other kinds of businesses. So sometimes it's helpful to have somebody who is just a little bit outside the norm. And if you happen to be a bit of a pop culture enthusiast, you could always watch The Simpsons because they come up with some weird stuff. So imagine some scenarios, imagine what's going to possibly happen, and define it. Next up, you're going to do a likelihood and cost assessment. Now we're dealing with potentially unusual business interruptions. So you're going to be looking at likelihood from a relative scale. Is it likely that there's going to be a power outage in a storm? Yeah, that's pretty likely. Is it likely to last a long time? Probably not. Is it going to be expensive? Maybe you lose a day or two of revenue. So you're going to always be assessing what is the likelihood that something can happen and what's the cost. And I'll show you a graphic in just a minute that'll help with that. Then you're going to red team your responses. So those of you who have a military background may have heard of red teams. They are typically in military exercises, the red team is the enemy. And their job is to probe and push and challenge your team in what you're doing, and to act in ways and to present questions in situations that are going to challenge your assumptions. So we'll talk about what a red team can do in just a minute as well. Then you're going to game plan your responses. You want to have these responses prepared. In a crisis, when things are happening, the less attention you have to focus on minutia, and the more that you can focus on large-scale decisions, the better off you're going to be. So if you game plan responses, you have a pre-programmed set of responses to whatever interruption you have imagined and you're working on. And then you're going to document. It does absolutely zero value to think about all of this stuff and then not document your pre-planned responses. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time. So the purpose of disaster recovery and disaster recovery planning is to generate these documents. Okay. All right. So we talked about risk assessment. We talked about where, likelihood and cost. So when you're looking at where you should devote your attention first, obviously the upper right-hand corner of this grid is where you want to spend your time first. Then as a business owner, you have to make a decision. Are you going to focus on the upper side of this chart, or are you going to focus on the right side of the chart? All right. If you're worried about cost management, then even if something is not likely, but it's costly, you may want to spend your time there. But if you're more worried about what's more likely to happen, then you want to spend your time in the two right-hand quadrants first. At some point, you're probably going to want to address most of the larger scale interruptions that you're worried about. But this is a way of helping you prioritize. It's not an exact science. You're just kind of thinking things, but this is where having a team that you can work with is going to be pretty helpful. So they can tell you, well, I think this is a little bit more likely. I think this scenario is more likely than this other scenario. And that way you can sort of determine where you're going to put your time and energy. All right. So tactical stuff. So this is where the red team comes into play. Okay. So when I say red team, the interruption, let's say you've defined 4 or 5 likely interruptions that you want to focus on that are costly. So the first questions that you want your red team to help you with is, what is this interruption going to look like? Like we said, nobody predicted a pandemic, and nobody predicted a pandemic response that would result in a restriction of business activity for as long as we've been involved in it. Okay, so what is it going to look like? How are you going to recognize it? Okay, next up, what's the expected length of the disruption? Like I said before, power outage, 1 to 2 days. Maybe 3 or 4 if it's a really bad storm or something like that. A pandemic, yeah, nobody expected it this long. Recovery from a flood might be a couple of weeks. So you want to think about how long your disruption is going to be so that you can plan accordingly, because you're going to be having to deal with a variety of things that we're going to talk about in a second. Okay, can you see it coming? All right, I sort of mentioned Tornado Alley a little bit ago, but if you were in Oklahoma in the spring and summer, you're in Tornado Alley. If you can't imagine a tornado coming through your town, you need to think about moving somewhere else. And so you need to plan for it. You can see it coming. If you're on the Gulf Coast and you aren't thinking about how to survive a hurricane, you need to think about moving somewhere else. So here in Maryland, are we getting a lot of hurricanes? Thankfully, no. Tornadoes aren't very common, but we do get ice storms. We do get snowstorms. One of the worst cases that I ever dealt with was the collapse of a roof of a business, and their insurance wasn't going to cover it. They had inadequate insurance and stuff like that. So that's one of the worst things that happened. So you can sort of imagine some of these scenarios and you can kind of see it coming. So then you want to think about the second and third order effects of the interruption. Now, this is where a red team is really, really helpful. So if you're not operating your business, that's pretty immediate. You sort of understand it. But what's the second order effects? Well, the second order effects is if you're not operating your business, you're not generating revenue. How are you going to pay your bills? Okay. If you're a service provider and you are working with contracts, do you need to now start invoking force majeure clauses? Do you need to make arrangements for subcontractors? These are the second and third order effects of the interruption. And it's helpful to think about these things because it's very easy to address the immediate emergency in relative scale. But then you need to start thinking about how do we get back into business and make sure we're not screwed for a long period of time. And the only way to do that is to think about the second and third order effects. This is where recovery planning is far more focused on ensuring that once the disruption is done, once we're moving past that, that we're able to revive the business. Okay, next up, what are the items that need to be addressed? What needs to be done? This is a simple checklist. Okay, who do we need to talk to? What order do we need to talk to them in? What order do we have to take for certain kinds of actions? So I talked a little bit about force majeure. You can start talking about force majeure fairly early on, but it's going to be pointless if you have no idea how long the expected disruption is going to last. There's no way of knowing that. So thinking about and determining where you are in the order of things can then help you plan your response. Okay, and what's the light at the end of the tunnel? What is your resolution? Where are you turning the corner from disaster response into business planning so that you're moving forward? All right, Maybe you can identify a particular point in time in your checklist. Maybe it's kind of a, we're gonna get there, but we may not know an exact sort of metric for it. It doesn't really matter, but I think it's helpful to remember that the purpose of recovery planning is not to just address the emergency. It's to address how do we get back into business. All right. So the other thing that the red team needs to do is challenge each and every assumption that you make. And I mean every one of them. All right. If you assume that power will be restored in 2 to 3 days, how do you know that? What is that based on? What kind of information do you need to collect? Okay. Are you assuming that your flood recovery plan, it can address both a natural flood, if you happen to be by the creek or the river or something like that, and a man-made flood, like your fire suppression system suddenly springs a leak and you have 2 inches of water in your store? These are the kinds of things that you want to assume, and then you want the red team to challenge those assumptions. The idea being is that you want to make sure that you are not assuming certain actions and assuming certain conditions that you have no evidence of. Work the problem. All right. Going back to movies and Apollo. In Apollo 13, actor Ed Harris was the character Gene Kranz. He was the flight director at NASA. And one of the statements that he made when they're trying to figure out how to get these astronauts back is he said, to work the problem, don't make things worse by guessing. All right. Work the problem. You're going to have an opportunity, because you're in a planning mode, to not be working the problem in a panicked mode. All right. You're getting to an opportunity to plan, but work the problem that you are presented with. You may come up with ideas as you're working on things, and that's fine. Write it down and set it aside and work the problem that you're presented with. Okay. Next up, identify the resources that you may need. Human resources, equipment resources, financial resources, third-party resources. But remember our first item here, you want to challenge every assumption. Do not assume that your resources or the source of your equipment or human resources are going to be available. What do you need to do to plan around that problem? If you happen to get your basic equipment and supplies from a local store, what if they've been hit by the same store or by the same storm? How do you prepare for that? Okay. Find a workable order of the response. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't, but it needs to be logical and it needs to be workable. All right. And then you're going to, well, these are the potential resources: human, financial, physical, alternatives. Sorry, sort of jumped ahead, but don't assume your resource availability, please. All right, always have a backup list of where you can go to get the same resources that you may need from other sources. All right, document, 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 document. All of this work is absolutely pointless if you don't write it down. All right, so you're going to document your response plan. Notifications of who and when you need to notify people. You're probably going to start with your employees. You're then going to have to worry about public communications, vendors and customers. How are you going to do this? If there's a power outage, most people have a cell phone, but what if their phone is not charged? How are you going to notify them? Notifying people by email in a loss of power situation is probably going to be pointless. Maybe not. It all depends on how you're going to do things, but these are the assumptions that you need to challenge. Your public communications, whether that's through Facebook, vendors, or Facebook, your website, whatever, all kinds of things are possible, but you need to figure out how you're going to do that. You should then going to have to talk to your insurance companies, I hope, and you're going to have to work out claims. You may need to address modifications to your plan. Now, the problem with most plans is if you adhere to them in a strict accordance to the plan that you pre-write, it may not look very well at tweaks. So imagine, let's go back to our flood scenario. There's going to be different kinds of calls that need to be made if it's a man-made flood because the fire suppression system sprung a leak, okay? Or there was a flood because the tenant upstairs had a plumbing problem. Those are different insurance claims. There's slightly different needs than if you happen to have been in a situation like it was in Ellicott City a few years ago, where there's a rushing flood running through the bottom floors of Old Town Ellicott City. All right, those are different claims. They're different modifications. Still a flood, but you may need to prepare a modification. You should document those foreseeable modifications. Again, this is part of your planning. All right, make a checklist. Now, I come from a Navy background. My dad was in the Navy. I was in the Navy. We love our checklists. All right. And the reason why we love our checklists is that it removes a lot of doubt about what is the next step. If you've ever seen the Tom Hanks movie where he played that airplane captain who landed on the Hudson River, you can see that his co-pilot is working through a checklist. All right. Emergency checklists are helpful. They're necessary. That allows you to know where you are in your response, okay? This should go without saying, but don't put your plans in one binder that you leave in your office. If your office catches on fire, you've got a problem. Your binder is, probably ashes. If you happen to be in a tornado zone and you put it in a binder and a tornado hits your office, your binder may very well be in the next county. It's not helpful if you don't have it in multiple places. So put the plans in multiple places. All right. Keep one in your car, keep one in your phone, keep one on your computer, keep one in the office, keep one at your home. Have multiple places. All right. So what happens when it hits the fan? All right. And I get this a lot. What do I do? So the first one, take a deep breath. All right. If you are panicked, if you are freaking out, and it's perfectly human to do it, you're going to make bad decisions. It is just human nature. Why you do the recovery planning and the pre-planning and the documentation is so that you don't make bad decisions. All right. But take a deep breath. Very few things are as bad as you think they are when they first start. Okay. Work the checklist. If you don't know what to do, work the checklist. Okay. You are a business leader. If you have employees, the greatest threat they have to their comfort is not the disruption. It is a leader who fails to make decisions. Work the checklist. If you don't think you're in a position to make major decisions, then don't. Work the checklist. Then assemble your team. Now, I tell folks that you should have a management team. Doesn't matter how big your business is. Your management team should include an accountant, an insurance broker, a banker, mentors, your spouse or significant other. Yes, I know it's a little self-serving, but have a lawyer. You may need to have, colleagues in other allied businesses. These are people who are going to help you assess the need for variations from the plan. If you need to have a variation from the plan, only do it after you have some consideration. All right. Again, if you're in an emergency situation, you don't know what to do, go back to the plan, but return to step one and take a breath. All right. It's the level of stress that people experienced in March and April of last year was extraordinarily high. As an attorney, it was rough for me. I was worried about my business because I represent small businesses. I had to go to many a business and help them with the worst case scenario of shutting down and laying off employees. I was called pretty much every name in the book, and I was told to engage in some anatomically impossible shenanigans. But for each one of these folks, we had to work the list. And by the time I got to the third or fourth client who was doing that, I already had a list. And just to amuse myself, I kept a list of the insults that I received. It's no fault of the business owner. It's no fault of mine. It is a situation. But when interruptions happen, emotions are going to be running high. So you want to be prepared for it. Okay. So I do want to talk a little bit about an insurance product. If there's any insurance brokers on the list, they may be able, or on the thing, they may be able to tell you a little bit more. But there are things called business interruption insurance. It's not a separate product. So you can't call up your insurance broker and say, hey, can I get some business interruption? You can get a standard rider, usually comes with your general liability policy, and it's usually for 30 days. You can pay extra, of course you got to pay, for basically a one-year rider. Natural flood. So if your business is in a floodplain, which I don't think Hyattsville is, but if you happen to be, flood and earthquake insurance is always covered separately. That's just the nature of the beast. Most business interruption insurance did not cover pandemic or public health losses. And this is something that most business owners learned the hard way when they called their insurance company, and the insurance company says, that's not covered. And remember, insurance companies have whole platoons of lawyers whose sole job it is to get them out of paying claims. So bear that in mind. All right. Now, a lot of people wonder, well, what about, the government shut me down? That's not really a pandemic. The government shut me down. Well, yes and no. Some civil authority actions may be covered and some may not. So something that could be covered and probably is covered almost guaranteed is, let's say you're in a multi-unit building. There's the unit, two units down from you has a fire, and your unit is fine, but the building inspectors come in and says, this roof is not stable. None of you can operate for a while. All right. That's a civil authority action that is not your fault. It is it's generally covered by business interruption insurance. Interruption insurance will cover the following things. And yes, I'm not kidding. It will pay your taxes and loan payments. So these are the things that business interruption usually covers. These are the things, direct losses from civil authority ones. These are the things that are usually not covered. Okay. So for whatever reason, broken glass is not considered structural. I don't know why, but structural damage is usually covered by other insurance, your landlord's insurance, your general liability insurance, your premises liability, those sorts of things. So these things are generally not covered. If you're a new business, you're probably going to be screwed unless you can document your income. So make sure your QuickBooks are up to date. Make sure you're keeping track of these sorts of things. Have your financial records. If you're an older business, you can generally show losses based upon tax records or things of that nature. All right. All right. So when risk becomes reality, do what you can with what you have, where you are. All right. When I was a young enlisted person in the Navy, I often had to work with soon-to-be officers. And my father had been an enlisted man in the Navy and made Chief Petty Officer. And he said the number one thing that scared him as a non-commissioned officer was indecision. It's better to make a wrong decision than no decision. All right. By the way, this isn't my stuff. This is actually Theodore Roosevelt. Okay. Disaster recovery planning helps you make decisions. All right. Even if it's not perfectly within the realm of the plan that you have, at least you have something that can spur decisions. Checklists help you make decisions. Pre-planning things helps you make decisions. All right. Make a decision. Even if it's the wrong one, generally you can recover from things. Okay. So time for what ifs, because nobody ever asks a lawyer a question without the implicit what ifs. And here is my contact information. And again, if you guys want a copy of this presentation, I'm happy to send it along. It does have some copyright information right there. So, feel free to share it around, but please don't change it or anything like that. Yeah. So Jim, if there are questions, I'm happy to try and do what we can.
So we don't see anything in the chat right this moment, but I'll leave this open at least for a few minutes. And Matt, just that was a lot of really helpful information, and I'm just for everyone participating, don't feel like you need to write everything down. So this presentation in totality will be posted on our city's website with a link that we'll post at the end. I'm going to add to the chat now a link for the Maryland Small Business. And as I said a little bit earlier, they do have a whole host of different webinars that are specific to topics, and I think most, if not all, are free. So while there are a lot pandemic related, there are also a whole host of trainings that are not necessarily pandemic related. That's a little bit more proactive post-pandemic. So if you've not looked at these courses previously, I'd encourage you to do so. They tend to have speakers like Matt who are well-versed in very specific topics relevant for small businesses. All the speakers are vetted by Maryland Small Business. And so certainly you should expect a high quality of speaker. I think we're going to move on because I don't see anything in the Q&A. Matt, thank you again. Feel free to hang on if you'd like. If not, certainly hope you have a tremendous rest of your day, and thank you again for spending a little time with us today.
Sure, I'll be around for about another 15 minutes before I got to jump off to another call, but
all right,
if things come up, I'll be around for a few minutes.
That sounds good. Thank you. So for the group, what we've incorporated in the business roundtables is a panel discussion, and we like to keep it topic specific. We thought a very relevant topic today was shifting to a digital operation. And I'm sure as business owners, there's varying degrees to which you can shift your operation, and some are easier than others. But wanted to have two businesses in particular that we thought were very good examples of making that shift, and certainly from a consumer end, it appears to be seamless, and we recognize that it's probably anything but. But certainly with restrictions, businesses need to be a little bit more flexible and creative. And so following panelists have been able to successfully adapt their operation and utilize digital platforms for their patrons. So I wanted to introduce first Katie Blattner, who is owner and operator of Three Little Birds Sewing Company here in Hyattsville. And Katie, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
And we also have Chris and Ashley Vigilante, owners and operators of Vigilante Coffee Company here on Gallatin Street. Chris and Ashley, good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having us.
So I wanted to pose a couple of questions to you both, and then as we go through, same sort of rules for the group. If you have any specific questions, drop them in the Q&A, and we'll turn our attention to those. But first question is to Katie. Katie, Three Little Birds now offers virtual sewing classes. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of adapting and conducting your classes digitally?
Yeah, so I would say the majority of our revenue doesn't actually come from all of this crazy fabric you see in the background. Having classes for us has a much higher margin. So I did indeed go into a slight panic when everything started to kind of shut down, and then the mask making craze hit us. So that was a whole nother thing to kind of deal with and, talk about unexpected. we had lots of new customers and people finding us all over the place, an elastic shortage, which I never thought I would say those words either. So lots of crazy new things happened. And once we kind of got that under control, my main focus was how do we continue teaching, which is really what I enjoy the most and why I wanted to open a space to begin with. And a lot of people were actually sewing masks. Machines were out of stock. And I think people just needed something to do at home, but obviously it wasn't safe for us to all be in a space and sew together. So I pretty quickly started testing the waters with doing some virtual classes. I started with ones that I knew didn't require a lot of supplies. So we started doing ones without sewing machines. We did, I think, hand embroidery first, and we might have done a cross stitch one too. So those were just supplies that, you know, you didn't need to have a machine at home. You didn't need to have a whole cutting setup. And they were pretty well received, and people really actually enjoyed having the recording as well, so they could go back and watch, which is something that you don't really get when you are in store. So after that, we started adding classes here and there and trying to adapt the classes that we already offered. So we weren't trying to recreate anything that we hadn't already tried out and didn't know that worked well. And we started doing our Learn to Sew series, which is a 5-week series. With the virtual aspect of it, it sometimes becomes a 6-week series because, you know, it's a little hard to help people via the camera. There's a lot of, you know, can you show me your machine? And people are like hovering their laptops or whatever over top of it. So there's a little trying to figure out those things. But for the most part, I have been really pleasantly surprised how the transition to the virtual learning was going. I have kids at home that are doing virtual learning. So seeing how that's going, some days are better than others. I was a little bit hesitant to have people on camera again. And, you know, I know lots of people are also spending a lot of time on work on Zoom. And, you know, I was a little concerned about the Zoom fatigue. But right now, currently, we have a Learn to Sew series that just started last week that we have 12 people in. And then we have some other classes going on as well. So we're offering probably about 6 to 7 different classes per month virtually. And that's pretty in line with what we were doing in person. Sometimes we'd be offering more in person, but I think that it has been a easier transition than I had planned for, but I did plan for it. I tested it out a lot. I tested it with friends. I've tested it with other people. I have some other people that are also instructors and they're instructing from their home too. And we really tried to recreate what we could have in person, but adapt to the things that were available to people at home. So we are also renting sewing machines. So if somebody wants to take a class that they don't have the supplies for, we are renting those out. We're also trying to put together kits for things that make it a little bit easier for people to have supplies at home. So really just trying to take away any mystery that we can and try to plan the best that we can for, you know, the things that we can't control. People's machines breaking, people overestimating their skills a little bit. All these things normally happen anyway in person, but obviously it's a little bit harder to work through those things virtually.
That's terrific. Chris and Ashley, obviously you've both adapted your operations quite a bit. Some of the curbside pickup, most obviously, and noticed recently you're open and everything is tarped, and obviously it's a little bit different experience. But maybe tell us a little bit about how you developed your digital platform and how your operations have changed.
Sure. Ashley is at the helm of our digital program, so I'll let her do most of the talking here. But we have been in a fortunate circumstance that we have been putting in the work with our digital efforts for about a year leading up to the pandemic. So that's what allowed the transition to occur. So there was some legwork that was put in that allowed it to happen as easily as it did. but continued progress, continued efforts to get it to where we are today.
Yeah, I mean, really for us, it was just trying to find a way to do it safely and to make it easy for our customers. So really trying to put ourselves in the customer perspective and being able to see, I think, a lot of other businesses, because a lot of businesses did stay open throughout the pandemic, so they never closed. So we really got to see a lot of businesses put up their online curbside and how they were handling things, and kind of learning from what worked and what didn't work in those experiences. It allowed us to be able to build out a nice online experience. And really, we're just lucky there's so many digital ways to do things now. We use Square, and Square makes it really, really easy to build out a pickup website. And then from there, it's really just taking the time to get really nice quality photos and really making sure that you're providing clear and concise descriptions for customers, and trying to make it so that it flows easily for not only our team, but also for customers, so that when they come to pick it up, they know exactly what they're supposed to do and where they're supposed to go, and trying to make it really seamless. So that's where we really tried to put a lot of our focus, was just how can we make this as seamless as possible for everyone, especially like customers, just because it's so different from how things used to be. From a lot of people that would come and sit in our cafes, you having it all to go. Like Katie was saying, we were dealing with shortages of things that we never thought we'd be on, like the scramble for to-go stuff became, everyone was running out of things. So yeah.
Curious, and you know, the types of businesses you both have. I'm curious how these answers might differ, but what sort of shift have you seen in the type of or volume of patrons?
I'll go first. We've seen at least a 30% reduction in our retail business. Okay. 50% in the first half of the pandemic. Okay. Worked its way down to about 30%. Our College Park store is probably at 50%. So we've seen a dramatic decline in our retail business.
Okay. And Katie, how about you?
So I have a unique situation, I think, because in the beginning, I would say April, May, June, when the whole mask thing started becoming important, people were sewing to donate masks. Our business was up. I'm not going to even give you a number because I don't think it's fair to say. But it dramatically dropped after that. You know, once the summer hit and masks became more widely available, people, I think, were taking breaks from not sewing as much. And so that has started to drop, which is why we had, you know, the ability to start the virtual classes, as well as the need to start doing it and to try to transition that, and actually also kind of capture the people that just started sewing just to make masks and kind of transition them to become lifelong, you know, members of our sewing community and continue to have them as customers. So, you know, it's kind of been a roller coaster, I'm sure, for everybody, but definitely for our business and the way that we're trying to like continuously pivot and keep customers. Certainly the sidewalk sales, the first sidewalk sales that we did here in SoHy really, really helped. The very first one we did was like the first time I had seen customers, because we completely shut down. We did have, you know, curbside pickup. We did some delivery, and we did a lot of shipping, way more shipping than we've ever shipped before. Like I'm sure a lot of people that are also doing retail sales. But the first time that we did the sidewalk sale was unbelievable. I mean, there were so many people that came out for that. And, you know, of course, it was great to see customers too safely. Of course, everybody's masked, distanced. And so that kind of, I think, reignited business again. So we're just up and down there, and it's hard to predict right now. I think we're kind of in an upswing right now. I have people that are asking about kids' virtual classes, which I don't know how I feel about that. So that might be another transition we're making in a little bit, but we'll see. So I think it's sometimes, you know, the classes are really up and the fabric sales are down and vice versa. It's kind of hard to predict right now.
It's I was just envisioning the kids part with my daughter's doing virtual learning too, and yeah, it's the days are up and down. But so Katie, I'm curious, with mandates eventually at some point lifting, or what long term, I guess, do you anticipate some of the changes you've adapted to, at least digitally on a digital platform? What do you see maintaining sort of as part of your business model moving forward?
Yeah, so actually, like Ashley mentioned, they use Square. I use a platform called Shopify, and Shopify also quickly pivoted and added local delivery, local curbside pickup options, and it makes it really, really easy. So I don't know if we'll keep delivery as an option, but I think we'll definitely keep a curbside option. People really like to kind of order ahead and then be able to pick up whenever they don't have to spend time in the store.
Yep.
I was just thinking about the virtual classes and whether we decide to continue with them or not. I don't know how long this whole thing will last and when it will really be safe for all of us to be in a smaller space to gather again. But one of the benefits of the virtual classes for us is that we've had worldwide participation. We've had people from Europe, from Canada, from all over the country participating in classes. And that was something that, we wouldn't be able to do in person. They wouldn't be here. So that has been really great and interesting to have. So I foresee us keeping some aspect of it. I don't know if we'll be doing the amount of classes virtually that we're doing right now, but maybe here and there we'll keep them, and it'll be a way to kind of grow the business globally, which is really nice and good for business.
Yeah, that's terrific. Yeah, it's with the classes. Yeah, that's. I guess. What are some of the places that you have people participating in?
So we've had a lot of Canadians. I think that's probably the easiest one, right? Especially the ones that are still in our time zone.
Yeah.
I had somebody from Egypt. I had some people from France. I've had, I think there was one lady from Australia. Of course, she was like opposite time. So she was like taking the class in the middle of the night. So it's been really cool. And it's interesting to see how people find us too.
Very nice. That's awesome. Chris and Ashley, you're dealing with more people, right? Yeah, both in terms of employees and customers in your space. Can you give everyone a sense of, what resources out there have been most useful for you all?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I'm going to share my screen with you guys. We developed a little PowerPoint that I thought might be helpful. Can everybody see that? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, got it.
So we use Shopify and Square. In store, we use Square. That's, the point of sale system we use. Online through our website, we use Shopify. We find that these two platforms to be the easiest, most user-friendly, and they just keep growing and getting better with time. I'll let Ashley take over.
So yeah, like Chris was saying, we use both of the two, depending on which operation we're talking about. So our in-store, we use Square, and we had been using Square previously. So this just made a very easy transition. They added an online ordering platform that was like specifically for restaurants or cafes. And it really allows you to pretty much take what we already had from our point of sale and just tidy it up. So they make it really easy to create and manage this on your own. You don't have to really have too much experience like building out a website or anything. It's all pretty seamless and easy to do on your own. So this is kind of the back end, just to show you guys some pictures. And it's all like on the side here. You can see it lets you break it down by categories, and it gives you the option to go in and add really nice photos and descriptions and just make it very clear what your products are. And then you can kind of see some back end screens here, just giving you a lot of options to be able to add variations and modifiers. Something that we quickly learned as we added this system is people want to be able to easily make modifications or customize whatever their orders are. Especially within coffee, we have a lot of variations. I'm sure everyone knows. And then we use Fresh KDS as our seamless side for our staff, being able to allow them to easily receive orders and process orders, and ensuring that it's all very easy.
So what happens is, breaking it down to my level of understanding, you got your in-house point of sale system, which customers order through online, right? www.vigilantcoffee and then the menu. And then when they place the order, it kicks it to these screens inside our shop, which are at different stations. And those screens are called Fresh KDS. Now, maybe those benefit all businesses, maybe just a few, but we found this to be really useful and help with, improving our online offerings.
And we've been using Fresh KDS since pretty much we opened our shop. That's just and that's something great about Square and Shopify both, is they have app add-ons that allow you to really customize your shopping experience for your customers depending on your business. And so, like I was saying, clean professional photos are always really nice.
On the professional photos, we didn't shoot these with an iPhone. Not that you can't start there. You can, absolutely. But you do want to get high quality images, because that's what people make a decision based off of. So, there's a lot of great local photographers. You can contact them through Instagram, and, for around 50 to $70 an hour, you can have them come shoot a variety of products for you, and then you'll be off to the races with a good look on your website. Clear, easy to read descriptions on products. Make it simple, stupid simple. Ease of modifying or personalizing. The checking out, nobody wants to jump through like 3 different pages to do it. They just want to make it really easy. And if it can remember your payment information, even better.
And that's something that Square does really well, is they pretty much allow you to, like, once you put your phone number in, it remembers all of your information, so that the next time you go, it just like sends a code and it has all of your stuff. It like autofills. So our customers have really appreciated the ease that Square has provided.
The loyalty programs or rewards, these are great for bringing repeat business. Customers coming back to you over and over again, you can give them a little bit of love back with a loyalty program reward. That can be as simple as a stamp card. But now these days they make a lot of them digitally. So they take a lot of the effort out for the small business owner. And then on the Shopify site, this is kind of what it looks like, right?
Yeah, this is like the back end, which is like Square, very easy to go in and add photos yourself, add sections. They give you a lot of different options to build out a website, and it's pretty simple to do this on your own. I'm not going to lie,
I will go ahead and weigh in there as someone who's not computer savvy. I would disagree with that statement, because if you saw Permanente Coffee's website in 2012, it's a whole different thing than what you see today. So you can get started yourself, but your quality, like the way that it will maybe look amateur because you're not a professional website designer. That's okay in the beginning. It's just a stepping stone. And then when you can afford to bring someone on that maybe has the capabilities of Ashley or a tech person, they can beef it up for you. But you can absolutely get started yourself like I did, and then grow it as you're allowed to.
And I was going to touch on that. Yeah, our site has a little bit more complexity to it, just because of the nature of our business and everything that we have integrated into our site. So we did have someone build this out, but Shopify has really simple templates that make it really easy to, like he said, just get started. And a lot of that really is like having those really nice photos. That's a huge part of it. And using all of the different apps that Shopify has to target specific things for your business.
This is all intimidating, by the way, and feel, like she's more of a techie. So she speaks from that lingo of like, yeah, it makes sense. For someone like myself, like apps, I can barely download an app on my phone. Okay. So to add them to my website, that would then add complexity. It sounds really hard, but it's not. It's actually quite simple. You just got to do it one step at a time and be patient with yourself, because it's a whole new endeavor. If you look at your online store like you're building a whole new store, then you will be successful, I think, because it takes that kind of mental fortitude and focus and longevity, because it's not going to happen overnight.
And just like your physical store, it's something that you have to constantly be maintaining and refining and constantly adding to and keeping it fresh. Customers want to see new products and new photos. And so it's like just like a physical store. It's something that you're constantly refining and making better and adding to. And so don't be super intimidated by like, oh, I have to make this thing like perfect from day one. It's just a work in progress.
Exactly.
That's incredibly helpful for everybody. So thank you both. I want to leave it open for a second. I don't see anything in the Q&A, but if anyone has any questions for Katie, Chris, or Ashley, feel free to raise your hand. We can promote you to a panelist, or you can drop it in the Q&A if you'd like. That's, I guess in terms of practical advice, Ashley, you just said it, thinking of your website as an extension of your physical location. For some of the folks who may not have the technical skills, is it a matter of maybe bringing on somebody who has some of that background but can do other things? Because I assume most people don't have the ability, certainly right now, to bring on somebody exclusively to manage their digital content.
No, and I don't recommend that.
Okay.
Yeah, as a small business owner, put yourself in the driver's seat. Go on in there and try to figure it out yourself, Shopify. And if after an hour or so you're like, this is way over my head, then you can reach out to someone on an hourly basis, bring them in the fold and say, hey, I just need help for 5 hours. And they get you started. But I think, even me, clearly stating I'm not a great technologist here, I do put forth the effort to learn it and to grow at it, all the while knowing I'm a novice. So I think as small business owners with limited funds, that we should absolutely try to tackle it ourselves at first, and don't discount social media. I'm sure Katie can testify to this, but a big way that we connect with the worldwide audience is through social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and these all feed off of that online store. It's like if you put a bus ad in Hyattsville and then people start coming to our physical location, it's a similar kind of mentality, but in the online world. So, yeah.
I would agree with that. I just wanted to touch on something that Ashley said, that one of our struggles was we already did have a website via Shopify because our POS and our website are connected. That's one nice thing about Shopify, is that you can choose to be connected via Facebook, Instagram, and your web store with like the click of a button, literally a click of a button. And so that's nice too. So on Facebook, Instagram, you can tag your products, which makes it shoppable. It makes it a little bit easier for people to find those products. One thing that we really struggled though with in the beginning was the maintenance of, and so our inventory, because we have a lot of inventory, we have a lot of different options, was trying to maintain that. So in the beginning, I think we have it a little bit under control now. I think some things, especially as we open, are probably inventory wise going to be a little bit more difficult. But there was a lot of emailing customers of like, hey, we're out of this. Do you want this instead? And so that was just adding so much more work, where, now it's that we have it more maintained, that we have a better system, that we don't have as much of that. I think there's always going to be some of it, but I did have one of the women that usually worked on the weekends for me. She was working on the back end of it at home, and helping clean up. And so I'm pretty well versed in Shopify. I did exactly what Chris is saying, go and explore, and it worked for us for a while. And then once we got to the volume that we got, it was no longer where I could like also maintain that. And that's the point that I was able to transition and exactly pay somebody a few hours. I wasn't like, hey, overhaul my entire website. But she spent a few hours here and there and adding some things that like I either just didn't know how to do or just didn't want to take the time to learn it because it was just too much, that she was able to take over that. So I think that's really good advice.
I think on that same point, just control what you can control. Like unforeseen catastrophes, plagues, buildings collapsing, you name it. We can't foresee any of this, and it could happen any day, like it's just life. But we can control certain things, and you can control your fate a little more in this time by putting some of your hours into the online effort. It'll pay dividends for sure. That's awesome, and thank you all for that type of really practical advice for everybody. We did get a question in for, I assume this is Chris and Ashley. You recommend anybody specific for photography? And that was from Valerie over at Will's. So either you can share that with her directly, if you want to share with the audience, you feel free to do so. Yeah, I'll comment. The Instagram handle for a photographer, several photographers that I think are really good, and they're in the Hyattsville area.
Okay. That's awesome. All right. Well, hopefully everyone was able to get a little bit, pull a little bit out of this panel discussion and adapt it to their businesses. But certainly, both these business operators are right here in Hyattsville. So if you have any additional questions, if you don't have their contact information, either let us know. If Chris, Ashley, or Katie want to drop it in to the chat, I think that would probably also be very helpful. But just want to thank all three of you for being great examples of trying to find the little successes given what everyone's been dealt with. And so thank you. It's been great hearing from all three of you today. And feel free to hang on. We're going to go through some updates, city updates and some programming updates. But thank you for participating. And I promised it wasn't going to be too painful.
No, that was fine. Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So we're going to go through some city. You're welcome. We're going to go through some city updates, and these are, we try to keep information that's relevant for the business community. But certainly, if there's after we go through this, if there's any additional information that you think would be helpful, feel free to drop it in the Q&A, and same rules. We'll go through it. If we don't see anything after the Q&A, we'll start our wrap up. So a couple things. Many people on the call are familiar with the city's COVID pandemic relief fund, which was made available for the city council for businesses. And then we have categories for child care providers and working artists. So we have obligated all our funds for businesses to the tune of $350,000 that's been administered from June 1st of last year. I think the fund was fully spent out in early November. And so right now we're still accepting applications for working artists and for childcare providers. But as of right now, we do not have any additional funds for businesses. There are some resources that are made available through Prince George's County EDC's website and also through State of Maryland Department of Commerce. If you look at the link I sent for a small business development center, there's information in there. I'm getting the sense that until we get some further direction from federal government, everyone's at a little bit of a standstill. I know the PPP program recently opened again for what's described as new applicants. And certainly we're seeing the federal government do some forgiveness on previous rounds of PPP, transitioning it from loans to grants. But certainly like everyone else, waiting to see what, if any, federal legislation gets approved for additional rounds of funding. Some of our users have asked about temporary outdoor seating. So the program is available through the city. So best description of this is if you have a use and occupancy permit that does not permit you to do outdoor sales or outdoor eating, the county will allow it through what is a temporary modification to your use and occupancy permit. You do have to apply for it. You do have to receive approval for it. The city has piggybacked on that at the request of the county. So if you intend to do so in Hyattsville, we have an agreement that needs to be in place as well. What happens is once you get your county UNO, you submit to us that information. We have an agreement that is online, and we can drop a link in that describes what is permitted, what is not permitted, where it's permitted. And so if you are interested in that, we'll provide that information in the chat. We have some information on our webpage. If you're interested, we have the agreement template there. and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me directly, and we'll be able to get back to you with any questions that you may have. If you, the other piece of this is if you are permitted to have outdoor seating by right as part of your but you're looking to expand that, that's also covered within this program. So it's intended to provide a lot of flexibility for uses. Again, it's probably more geared towards restaurant and eatery type uses, but certainly, as Katie mentioned, doing the outdoor sales as part of a programming effort, she found to be beneficial, and that some of the same we received from our business community. CFI and CIP programs. So this is the city's commercial facade improvement program and corridor investment program. So our most recent rounds have closed, and the city has awarded funding for both of these programs. Corridor investment program is more of a micro grant program for anything that is business development related, some placemaking. We also have the option of securing funds to piggyback on the commercial facade improvement program. So anyone, I think most of our CIP applicants have either executed their agreements or still have it in hand ready to receive back. So anybody on the line who did receive funding, who has signed their agreements, you should expect to receive those probably next week. They were routed last week, and so there's a little bit of time between executing those agreements and having purchase orders out. We're in the process of developing our next fiscal year budget, which starts on July 1st. As of right now, we do plan on including another round in terms of a request for the CIP program. But again, that's subject to approval and other considerations about the city's budget are taken into account. But we do intend to submit the request, and the funding level will be similar to this past year, and so in the $25,000 to $30,000 range. Commercial facade improvement program. I know we've spoken about it several times. So this program is intended for visitors to the facade of buildings, covers doors, windows, lighting, canopy. If you are interested in this program, if you are the property owner, certainly there are less conditions. If you are the business operating in a space that is owned by someone else, we require you to secure permission of the owner. We, the city, have submitted a funding request to the state of Maryland, which is the source of our revenue to operate this program. We submitted it in November. In the context of the state budget, we don't know to what degree the program will be funded. So I expect to know probably March or April of this year. Once we receive notification that it will or will not be funded, we'll advise the business community and the city council. If it is funded, we will go out with a round of CFI applications. We tend to try to push those in the May to June window. That allows a longer period of time for applicants to respond. And generally that is brought to our city council in the fall, early part of fall. Awards are approved by the council, and then there's some time between once that's approved and in getting those agreements in place. And so with this round, we have grant agreements that I think went out earlier this week. We'll have hopefully those executed in the next couple of weeks, and at that point work commences. So if you're curious about the program, we can point you to some folks who have participated and give you sort of firsthand experience, what they like, what they didn't like, how the funding is used, what sort of improvements they made. Let us know, and we'd be glad to make that connection for you. Business licensing and inspections. So the city's continuing our licensing program. And I think I touched on this previously, We have augmented our inspection schedule really around off-peak hours. So we have extended inspections to now Saturdays and Sundays. We do early morning inspections. We do late evening inspections. Those are all coordinated by our Supervisor of Permits and Licensing, Ms. Christine Redman, who is on the line. One of the other things that we've done is transition our payments through a payment portal. And so if you have any questions about how to pay that, Ms. Redman has dropped that link into the chat. And again, this is part of the city going to a more digital platform. I do anticipate next year in 2022 to have even a more synchronized platform in place where you would be able to make your payment and submit your application all online in one location. And because right now payments are made in one portal and then we have the application online. It's a matter of some other things sort of coming online, but again, trying to make it a little bit more seamless for our business community. If you have not had your inspection yet, please contact Ms. Redmond. She'll work with you on getting an inspector in there during your off-peak hours, so as not to interfere with either your operation or create any capacity issues for you all. And we have Ms. Redmond here. If anybody has any questions about the inspections and licensing process, you can drop it in the Q&A or raise your hand. What is the contact email for the information on the upcoming programs? We will drop in links for both the CFI program and the corridor investment program into the chat. There is not a newsletter. The city twice a year publishes I forget the name of it. It's effectively a business guide. It's an economic development report. Typically, we'll have those produced in May and October. It's generally the schedule we maintain. We can also provide a link to our business guide. And so that is posted online as well as printed format. If you would like a printed copy, let us know and we'd be glad to drop one off. But there's usually information in there that is program specific, development updates. We try to keep it thematic. And so last was obviously very pandemic focused. This time around in May, I don't know what it's quite going to look like, but we have some thoughts that it may be focused on business retention, which is the next area that I am going to touch on. Some of the folks on the call are familiar. Every 5 years, the city conducts a comprehensive strategy, and our most recent plan, our community sustainability plan, was produced in 2017 and runs through 2022. And one of the takeaways through that, one of the actionable items that was identified was developing a business retention and expansion strategy. For those who are not familiar what that is or that terminology, it is where communities, one of the economic development, creating programming that helps you business owners stay here and expand your business here. The city historically has not been in the market of business traction. And the reason why is there's a diminishing return and on that type of investment, whereas statistically, it is a better use of public funds to make sure that our businesses that are here stay here, and there's opportunities for them to expand their operation, monetarily or physically. And so in the next 2 weeks or so, we're going to start on that project, and that will require a lot of participation from our business community. And so I anticipate between now and May, There will be opportunities for businesses to provide feedback on why they started here, what keeps them here, and what will keep them staying in Hyattsville. And so obviously some of what we talked about today is going to be, I think, very relevant to the topic. And the goal is at the end of that process that we have a playbook effectively to work from on how we're investing resources from the city, and it certainly gives the city council a very sound understanding of what the business community needs and what decision points are necessary to deliver that type of programming. And so it is intended as a very outward facing document. And certainly once we get started, we'll notify you all, and you can be as active as you would like in that development of that strategy. So more to come on that, but certainly it's one of those projects that we've worked diligently to get to the point where we're ready to move forward with that. And so I don't expect that study or that strategy to take a whole lot of time. My goal would be to have something in place by September of this year. And at that point, we'd start delivering programming that was consistent with that BRE strategy. All right, we've got a hand raised. Mike, I'm going to promote you to panelist because it might be just easier for you to state your question, unless you want to drop it in the Q&A. All right, Mike, you should be able to speak now. Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Hey, good morning, everybody. First, great from Kate and Chris, amazing panel discussion. I'm very excited about the idea of the business retention survey and all that. It's long overdue. I would say this is the time to turn over, I don't want to say a new leaf, but continue the momentum of so much better communication between the businesses and the city. And I would like to see some businesses in a panel involved from the very beginning and all the way through this process. So it's all decisions are kind of a committee of the businesses and a partnership between the cities and the businesses. And the only way to do that is have the businesses in on every single discussion. So that's my feedback.
Yeah, and that's helpful. I'm glad you said that, Mike, because the reality is for something like this, it can't be done in a vacuum, and so we'll probably model some of it off the way we developed our sustainability plan, where there's a degree of sort of stakeholder interviews, but there's sort of collective planning efforts that we put together that help vet ideas. And then narrow that down to, okay, what's really important, what's really actionable to make it really simple for business operators to understand. We don't want it to be an overly complex document. And I think the only way we get there is soliciting that feedback and having that active participation.
Okay, but who's the decision? Who are the decision makers? I mean, how do decisions how do decisions get made?
I mean, at the end of the day, it's the city council will make decisions. We've modeled that similar path. We're conducting an affordable housing strategy. Mm-hmm. It won't look terribly dissimilar to that, where we have a group of stakeholders that help really inform the document, and then there's a broader public discussion. It goes back to the stakeholders, and then ultimately, whatever strategy is ultimately drafted needs to go to the city council And there we'll figure out, if there's a group of 7 decisions, right? 7 programs, are we keeping it at 7? Are we getting it to 3? Are we keeping it at 5? What resource impacts that or obligations that create? So it'll be some of that, but ultimately the city council will have decision-making rights on what stays and what goes, and what resources the city is committing to deliver that type of program.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you, Mike. So I don't see any additional questions on this, but I'm sure they'll come up. Certainly, if you all have questions as we start, feel free to send them in, and we can answer them as best we can. We're certainly not going to have all the answers at the onset, but as the process sort of works itself out, I think we'll have more information to be able to guide some of those decisions. So we're going to provide the businesses with some development updates. Again, it's not everything. It's the projects that we think are probably most relevant to the business community, and they are certainly the development projects that are not speculative and have a very high likelihood of actually being constructed. And so we thought it would be a little bit more helpful for you all to understand physically what changes are on the horizon, but also how they impact customer bases. And so for that, I'm going to hand it over to our city planner, Kate Powers. Kate can walk you through some of the projects. And again, if you have any specific questions after she's done, you can feel free to ask.
Great, thanks, Jim. We're already at 11:30, so I'll just go through these quickly. But the first is the Kaiser Permanente Medical Office Building. I'm sure many of you know that Kaiser was at University Town Center, but now they are creating a brand new medical office facility right by the West Hydesville Metro. You can see in the image that it's to the left there of Acre Road. And so this 3-story medical office building will include structured parking, and within the structure, there will be administrative offices, medical offices, a small pharmacy, a coffee shop, and a medical lab. And so just sort of recently, in May of 2020, the Prince George's County Planning Board approved the applicant's detailed site plan for this office building, and the developer anticipates starting construction early this year, with the building being completed in 2023. And then here is just a night rendering of the building, and you can see the Kaiser Permanente logo there on the right. Next, we have Riverfront at West Hydesville. This is another development near the West Hydesville Metro Station. And so Gilbane Development has completed site grading for this project and anticipates completing the roadway infrastructure early this year. Their site plan has 183 townhomes on the site. They'll be constructed and sold by Stanley Martin. The first 54 townhouse units are scheduled to start construction early this year, with a total build out of the remaining townhouses over several years. And then Gilbane Development is preparing a detailed site plan to also include multifamily buildings as part of this development as well. Here you can see a more detailed overview of this development you see the townhouses here over to the left, and the potential multifamily buildings further to the right. And then lastly, we have the Dewey Development. This is directly north of University Town Center. It's currently a surface parking lot as well as some undeveloped forested land. And so this development was divided up into 5 different parcels, one of which including a regional stormwater management facility. It'll also include 2 multifamily buildings, as well as 168 multifamily condominium units as well. And so the detailed site plans for the multifamily buildings and the condominiums, they were approved by the planning board last year, and Park and Planning is currently in the process of approving the certified plans for this site. And so here you can see a full overview with the condominiums along Bellcrest Road, as well as some along Adelphi, and then the 2 multifamily buildings are on Toledo Road. And then you can see sort of a rendering of the building that is along Toledo Road and the new public road that will be an extension of Toledo Terrace right here. And then here we have just contact information for Jim, myself, and Christine. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Kate. So if we have any questions, again, drop it in the Q&A. We'll be able to answer them. And again, it's not, this isn't every project. These are the projects that are have the highest degree of certainty of being constructed. And so we can drop in the chat the city's development page, which has a more comprehensive list of projects that are already constructed or those that are pending. I also dropped into the chat links for the city's commercial facade improvement program, our corridor investment program, and then our semi-annual economic development report. Next edition of that will be in May. Again, if you have any questions, and there's nuggets in there for everybody. So not all of it's intended to appeal to every reader, but we try to include in there some of the more relevant and time-sensitive programs, projects. So again, any questions, feel free to contact us. So Kate, we have a question about what will happen with the parking at Dewey and Toledo Roadside.
So as I mentioned before, currently it is a surface parking lot, and there is currently a legal dispute between, I believe it's Metro 3, the owner of Metro 3, and the development team that is planning on redeveloping the site. I know that this was brought to the attention of our city council, and they decided that this was sort of outside of their purview, as it is a legal dispute between 2 independent parties. And this also came before the planning board, and they had the same idea of, you know, as a, you know, a planning organization, that a legal dispute between, you know, third-party individuals, you know, it's not really up to them to decide what ultimately happens. And so it's sort of out of our hands and out of the planning board hands, and whatever the legal decision is between these 2 parties is what will be followed, but it's not exactly within our purview to decide or know.
In terms of capacity, so there are 2 structured parking facilities adjacent to the existing surface slot, both of which are significantly underparked and would offer plenty of capacity to make up, you know, whatever parking is lost on that surface lot. So in terms of capacity, that there's already infrastructure in place to be able to address that. But yeah, I think once the park will dispute, the project will move forward, and certainly brings a substantial amount of new residents to the city. So that is pretty much it. And so we'll just conclude by saying thank you to our panelists today. I hope everyone was able to get some valuable information from both the presenter and the panelist discussion. If you'd like additional information, feel free to contact us. We'd be more than happy to share. Our next roundtable, tentatively scheduled for May. We'll probably select a date in April. We'll send it out as a save the date. Once we figure out the theme, we'll let everyone know. It may be BRE centric, but we won't know exactly until we get a little bit closer to the date. So that we'll sign off. Thank you everyone for participating, and feel free to contact us if you have any questions. One last thing that I remembered. So the city's parking supervisor, Gary Bullis, is with us. Gary is relatively new. Just wanted him to say hi quickly, introduce himself. Some of you may interact with parking on a regular basis, some may not. But Gary comes to us with a long history of managing parking, customer service, and so it's one of the roles forward-facing that's very important for the city, and so wanted him to just quickly say hi and introduce himself to the audience.
Hello all. Yes, I've very experienced in parking, got 20 plus years in the industry. I'm glad to be on board with the city of Hyattsville. I've met some of you, not everybody, but I look forward to meeting you all and working with you.
Thank you, Gary. All right, with that, we'll sign off roundtable. We're 12 minutes over, but certainly hopeful that the hour and a half or plus that you spent with us is valuable, and you're able to walk away with some information that is applicable for your business. We should have this posted to our business roundtable link by the end of the day today. So if you want to share it, or if anything we discussed today, you want to go back and take a look at, it will be available for you. And again, thank you, and have a great rest of your day.